The year 2023 started as one of the most challenging periods of my life. After a heated fallout with my dad, I needed to get away from everything familiar and find some space to clear my mind. That's how I ended up renting a small cabin in the middle of nowhere. The landlord, a man in his late 50s, had seemed eager to lease the place. He told me he needed to step away for a while due to some personal matters, and his cabin, tucked away at the end of a dirt road, was available on a month-to-month basis. The arrangement was perfect for me, no long-term commitment and total seclusion. The cabin itself was small but cozy. It had a rustic charm with its wooden walls, creaky floors, and a stone fireplace that gave it a warm, nostalgic feel. The upstairs bedroom was unique, accessible only through a wooden hatch door you had to push open from the living room. At first, I thought the setup was quaint, even a bit adventurous. But as the days passed, the isolation started to feel more like a weight pressing down on me. I fell into a routine quickly. Work consumed most of my day, with 12-hour shifts that left me completely drained. I'd come home, make a quick meal, usually something as simple as a peanut butter sandwich or instant noodles, and collapse in bed. The quiet of the cabin at night was both a blessing and a curse. Sometimes, the silence felt like a balm for my frayed nerves. Other times, it felt oppressive, amplifying every creak and groan of the old house. It was a Thursday night when everything changed. That evening, I got home later than usual. The woods surrounding the cabin were pitch black, the only light coming from the faint glow of my car's headlights. I hurried inside, locking the door behind me and tossing my bag on the couch. After making myself a quick snack, I climbed up to the bedroom, pushing the hatch door closed behind me. It didn't have a lock, but I convinced myself that the thick wooden slab was enough to keep out any unwanted visitors. I turned on the small TV perched on the dresser, its soft glow casting long shadows across the room. As I settled into bed, a sound broke through the quiet. A voice. "Who's up there?" At first, I froze, my brain scrambling to make sense of what I'd just heard. Had I imagined it? My heart began to race as I strained to hear more. The voice had been muffled, but it sounded like it came from somewhere inside the house, ripping the edges of the blanket. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was the TV. I grabbed the remote and muted the screen. The silence that followed was deafening. I listened for what felt like an eternity, but there was nothing, no footsteps, no voices, just the creaks and groans of the old house. Summoning my courage, I crawled over to the small circular window above the bed and peeked outside. The dirt road leading to the cabin was empty, shrouded in the kind of darkness only the woods could provide. I whispered, "Hello, who's there?" No response. I told myself it had to be my imagination. Exhaustion was playing tricks on me. That was the only logical explanation. But deep down, I couldn't shake the unease creeping up my spine. I tried to go back to bed, pulling the blanket tighter around me. The soft hum of the TV filled the room, and I focused on its glow, willing myself to relax. Then came the pounding. Loud, deliberate knocks echoed from below, so forceful they seemed to shake the entire cabin. My body went rigid as terror gripped me. Someone was downstairs. The pounding continued, relentless and angry. It wasn't the kind of knock you'd expect from a friendly neighbor or a lost hiker. This was something else, something meant to terrify. I sat frozen on the bed, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The hatch door had no lock, and the thought of the intruder climbing up the stairs and pushing it open made my skin crawl. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand, but my hands were trembling so badly that I almost dropped it. I dialed 911, but hesitated before hitting the call button. What would I say? That I heard knocks and thought someone might be inside? What if it was nothing? The last thing I wanted was to look foolish. The pounding stopped as suddenly as it started. The silence that followed was even worse. My ears strained for any hint of movement, footsteps, creaking floorboards, anything. Gathering every ounce of courage, I crept to the hatch door and opened it just enough to peek down the staircase. The living room was dark, illuminated only by the faint light of the moon filtering through the curtains. "Hello?" I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. Nothing. I needed to check. Slowly, I descended the stairs, each step feeling like a leap of faith. When I reached the bottom, I flipped on the lights, flooding the living room with a warm glow. Empty. I moved to the front door, checking the lock. It was still secure. The windows were shut, and everything appeared untouched. But the uneasy feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. Deciding I couldn't stay there any longer, I grabbed my jacket and headed for the car. The cold night air bit at my skin as I sprinted across the yard. I flung open the car door and climbed inside, locking it behind me. My hands were still shaking as I started the engine. That's when I saw it. A shadow moved across the front window of the cabin. It was brief, almost imperceptible, but enough to make my heart leap into my throat. Someone was inside. I called 911, my voice shaking as I explained the situation. The dispatcher assured me that officers were on their way. As I waited in the car, my eyes never left the cabin. The front door remained closed, and no lights turned on, but I could feel the presence of someone or something inside. When the police arrived, their flashing lights illuminated the driveway. 2 officers entered the cabin, while a third stayed with me, asking questions about what I had seen and heard. After what felt like an eternity, the officers emerged from the house. They found no one, but their expressions told me they weren't entirely convinced it was my imagination. One of them mentioned that the back door had been unlocked, even though I was sure I had locked it before leaving. I didn't sleep that night. I packed my things the next morning and left the cabin for good. To this day, I don't know who or what was in that cabin with me, but I do know one thing. I'll never rent a secluded cabin again. My wife Gianna and I lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind where nothing unusual ever happened. We had ordinary jobs, a cozy home, and neighbors we exchanged pleasantries with. It was a life of predictable routines, and we liked it that way. But one particular night shattered that illusion of normalcy and left us with questions that still haunt us. It began like any other weekday. After work, we decided to go out for dinner. By 9 o'clock, we were back home. Like clockwork, we brushed our teeth and got ready for bed. By 10 o'clock, we were settled in, either reading or watching our favorite show. That night, we opted for the show A Light-Hearted Escape Before Sleep. At 10:15 p.m., the phone rang. Gianna and I exchanged puzzled glances. "Who could be calling this late?" she asked. "I'll get it," I replied, thinking it might be an emergency. The phone was an old landline, and its ringing had a sharpness that cut through the quiet night. But by the time I reached for it, the ringing stopped. The caller ID had already disappeared, a quirk of our outdated device. Probably a wrong number, I shrugged, returning to bed. But barely 5 minutes later, the phone rang again. This time, I reached it before it stopped. The caller ID displayed unknown number. My heart sank slightly. Late-night calls from unknown numbers rarely meant good news. I hesitated, and the ringing stopped again. Gianna's unease was written all over her face. As if on cue, the phone rang a third time. This time, I didn't hesitate. I picked it up. "Hello?" I said, my voice tense. On the other end, I heard the voice of our neighbor, Al. He lived 2 doors down and was the kind of neighbor who always waved when he saw you. His voice was calm, but serious. "Do you know there's a man standing outside your house?" he asked. My stomach dropped. What? What are you talking about?" Before I could ask anything else, the line went dead. I repeated Al's words to Gianna. Her eyes widened in alarm. "Don't go out there," she urged. "I'm just going to take a look," I assured her. Carefully, I moved to the living room and peeked through the curtain. The porch light illuminated the front yard, but everything looked normal. There was no one there. Feeling braver than I probably should have, I opened the front door. The cool night air greeted me as I stepped onto the porch. I scanned the area, even checking the bushes near the house. Nothing. Frustrated, I returned to the bedroom. "There's no one out there. Al must be pulling some kind of prank," I said. "That doesn't sound like him," Gianna replied. I agreed. Al wasn't the type for jokes, especially not like this. To clear things up, I decided to call him back. The phone rang twice before going straight to voicemail. I left a message. "Hey Al, what's going on? You said someone's outside, but I don't see anything. Call me back." A few moments later, the phone rang again. It was the same unknown number. I picked up. "Hello?" This time, Al's voice was more insistent. "Go outside. There's someone standing outside your house." My chest tightened. The calm in his voice made it even more unsettling. Before I could ask him anything, he hung up again. "Stay here," I told Gianna, grabbing a flashlight from the drawer. I went downstairs and peeked through the curtain once more. My breath caught in my throat. At the end of the walkway, where it met the sidewalk, stood a man. He was still, his hands tucked into the pockets of a dark hoodie that concealed his face. My heart raced as I opened the door, staying behind the storm door for safety. "Can I help you?" I called out. The man didn't move. I stepped back inside and locked the door. The phone rang again. It was Al's number this time. I picked up, my voice shaky. "Al, what's going on? What are you talking about?" he asked, sounding genuinely confused. "You just called me twice about someone outside my house," I said. "No, I didn't," he replied. "I've been watching TV with my wife all night. What's going on?" Chills ran down my spine. "There's a man standing outside my house. You didn't call me?" "Absolutely not," Al insisted. "I haven't touched the phone tonight." "Then who?" My voice trailed off. Al put his wife on the line to confirm his story. She backed him up, swearing they hadn't made any calls. Meanwhile, I explained what had been happening. Gianna, now sitting next to me, listened to both sides of the conversation. When we hung up, I went to the window again. The man was gone. The night didn't end there. Around 11:30 p.m., the phone rang again. It was the same unknown number. My hands trembled as I picked it up. This time, there was no voice on the other end, just silence. "Hello?" I said, my voice cracking. A faint sound came through a low, raspy breathing. Then, after a few seconds, the line went dead. Gianna was visibly shaken. "We should call the police," she said. "I don't even know what to tell them," I replied. "That someone's prank calling us?" The logical side of me wanted to believe this was just some elaborate joke, but deep down, I knew it was more than that. By midnight, we decided to try and sleep. Though sleep felt impossible, I stayed up, listening for any sound outside. At 1 o'clock, I heard faint footsteps on the porch. My blood ran cold. I grabbed the flashlight and crept downstairs, avoiding any creaky floorboards. I peeked through the peephole. Nothing. But when I opened the door, I found something on the welcome mat. A single piece of paper, folded neatly in half. I unfolded it with trembling hands. Scrawled in messy handwriting were the words, "Stop looking." We called the police that night. They arrived within minutes and searched the area, but found nothing. The note was taken as evidence, but they had no leads. Over the next few weeks, the calls stopped, and life slowly returned to normal. We installed security cameras and upgraded our locks. To this day, I don't know who the man was, or how he managed to mimic Al's voice so perfectly, The police never found any suspects, and the incident became one of those unexplainable events that linger in the back of your mind. But every so often, late at night, I think I hear the faint sound of footsteps outside, and I wonder if he's still out there, watching.